you raise the volume some, please? Raise the volume, please, if that's possible.
I think just talk.
Just talk close, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Just try not to bang it against my teeth. Again, it's a wonderful turnout. I'm not surprised that it is, because I know that there are many people in Watertown who are very passionate about this issue, who have been involved in this issue in a variety of ways. And I think that really speaks to the importance of immigrants to Watertown. Immigrants, are a large and a valued part of this community. The one figure that always jumps out to me is that we have in our schools here in Watertown, over a third of our students are from families where the first language is not English. 1/3 of our students. And I think what that shows is that they and their families are really a very, very large part of the fabric of this community. They are people who run businesses in Watertown. They are the customers of businesses in Watertown. They are active in a whole range of community organizations and community activities. And they bring a huge amount to our community as our neighbors and as our friends. At the same time, I don't think there's any denying the fact that immigrants here in Watertown, as elsewhere in the United States, are under enormous pressure right now. From an administration that has adopted, I think, what are the most anti-immigrant attitudes and policies that we have seen for many decades in the United States, and who blame immigrants unjustly for a whole range of ills. We hear constantly about the responsibility of immigrants for criminal activity, when we know that that's simply false. The data is very clear that immigrants are less likely to be involved in any sort of illegal or criminal activity than those of us who were born in this country. Immigrants are being blamed for a whole range of economic ills, when again, the data makes very clear that immigrants add to our economy. And I want to emphasize that the attitudes and the policies that this administration is bringing to the area of immigrants and immigration are not just limited to undocumented immigrants. If you think about what this administration has done in terms of its policies on refugees, its policies on asylum seekers, its efforts to limit legal immigration to the United States, its efforts to remove people who are legally in the United States because circumstances in their own countries are too dangerous. I think it speaks to a broad anti-immigrant attitude that, again, is unprecedented, at least in my lifetime in this country, and which has resulted in enormous pressure on those very valued members of our community. And of course, they are the ones who are directly hurt by those attitudes and those policies, but I firmly believe that all of us and our community as a whole suffers as a result of that wind that is blowing from Washington, D.C. these days. So that is some of the context for the conversation we're going to be having tonight. I want to thank, in absentia, my other colleagues in the legislature from Watertown, Senator Will Brownsburger and John Lawn, both of whom were very involved and very supportive of our having this event tonight. They both have other commitments and are not able to be here in person, but I know that they are very much interested in this conversation itself. They're very involved in the work we're doing at the legislature around immigrant rights and immigrant protections, and I thank them for their help in putting this event together. I'm going to turn things over now to our other panelists. We do very much want to engage in a conversation with you, so we're going to save a lot of the time that we have here this evening for your questions, for your comments, for that kind of a dialogue. But we are incredibly fortunate to have with us several individuals who have been really, in the most sort of practical and on-the-ground sense, engaged in working with our immigrant community in trying to think about these issues in terms of what is best for our entire community, and who have really a very strong understanding of what it means to approach issues of immigration and approach members of the immigrant community with their welfare in mind and with the broader welfare of our whole community in mind. So I'm going to first give the microphone to our police chief here in Watertown, Chief Michael Lawn, who can speak from his vantage point, and then we will then turn to our District Attorney, Marian Ryan, who will talk from her vantage point as a prosecutor and as someone who works daily in our court system. And she has brought along with her an attorney who has been working with her on these issues, and they will be sharing their story of really a remarkable achievement that they are responsible for, together with the District Attorney for Suffolk County, Rachel Rollins, where they won a really remarkable victory in our federal courts, addressing some of the most disruptive activities of I.C.E. and the federal immigration enforcement agencies in our courthouses. But first, let me turn to Chief Lawn.
Thank you, John. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight and to discuss this very important issue. So first of all, my name is, for those who don't know me, my name is Michael Lawn. I grew up here in Watertown, and I've been on the police department for the last 31 years in Watertown, with the last 5 being as the chief of police. John mentioned State Representative John Lawn. He happens to be my little brother. He wanted me to convey to you, he actually was supposed to be in Maine with his family today for a hockey tournament. His family went to Maine, and he is at home with the flu. I just dropped off some vitamin C packs for him on the way down there. So he wanted me to convey that he was sorry he couldn't be here. So I see a lot of familiar faces here, and a lot of you probably already heard me talk about this. I've spoke, I think, 2 years in a row at the Unity Breakfast. I've spoke with Project Literacy. Will Twombly and Sue Ellen are here from the Watertown Welcomes Immigrants Coalition. I've done a lot of work with them. They were back in my office Tuesday morning, first thing after the holiday, just to talk about, what kind of came out in the media over the weekend. So just to back up kind of what we've done over the past few years, and I'll try to be brief in my statements because I've heard them before, and I know a lot of people have questions about what the police do and what the police don't do and this and that as far as immigrants involved. But when this kind of, the immigration came to the forefront a few years ago and was really, being talked about, I met with Will and Swan and the groups, and we formulated a policy here in Watertown, and it's a police policy. And typically when the police make a policy, the police make the policy, or the DAs might have a little input into it. This was the first policy that we actually had input from the community. So that police policy on how we deal with immigration and immigrants had a lot of input from Sue Ellen and Will and their group. So I'm proud of that policy that we've developed, and we've shared our policy with other police departments to formulate their policies. When I talk about Watertown, I grew up here, and Watertown's a real unique community. And for those of you who've been in Watertown, it's not just Irish and Italian and Armenians and Greeks. We have, I think John said it, there's over 100 different languages spoken in our school system here. So our police officers are so used to dealing with all different types of cultures, and I think that's what makes us proud to be police officers in this community, that we are dealing with so many different people and so many different customs and norms that we have to learn. We just did a training in September, and I had an imam from the mosque in Cambridge come and speak to all our new officers and even our old officers to kind of explain some of the customs of what the different headgear means, or why, just different things about the Muslim community. And then we had, for the first 2 hours, and then we had someone from the Armenian community come in and speak about the Armenian community. So we're constantly trying to train our officers and dealing with the different facets in our community, and I'm proud of the training we did. But what I really want people to know, and I say this over and over again, is that we do not care about people's immigration status. We do not. We do not do I.C.E.'s work, okay? If you call us, we're coming to help you. End of story. I told this story recently. We had a domestic violence incident, and both undocumented immigrants, the suspect and the victim. We had the victim, I'll never forget, in our detective office. She had 3 kids with her. She was nervous. The officers just did a great job putting her at ease. By the end of that night, they all chipped in money and went down to Target and bought her diapers and food, and she walked out of that police station with those items. That's what's happening at the Watertown police station, all right? I'll conclude my comments. I'll conclude my comments, and I know Marian's heard me say this before, so I'm the son of 2 immigrants, all right? My parents immigrated here from Ireland back in the 1960s. They both became citizens here eventually, but when they came here, they struggled. They had no family support here, especially my father. He was the only one that came out here. I think my mother had an aunt here, and that was it. So I understand the struggles that they went through, just assimilating into this country. So you have my word, as a son of 2 immigrants, that I'm here to take care of the immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you for being here tonight. And 2 things that I don't want to lose sight of tonight. The first of all is how well you have chosen in this community, in the people that are representing you. To have both our legislators and our chief out here on a night just to provide education, that's a great thing. And the work that we've done across this community, we were here a few weeks ago having a similar meeting for folks who found themselves in violent situations and were concerned about calling the police. We were up at one of the churches with a room full of people talking about that. The choices you make about who leads you do matter, and you've chosen well in this community. And it is reflected in the kind of policies that you have here. And you heard a little bit about the demographics of Watertown. Well, those are similar to what we have across Middlesex County. Middlesex County is enormous. It's 1/4 of the state of Massachusetts, 877 square miles, 1.6 million people. We have more people in Middlesex County than we do in 11 states in the country. So when you're watching those presidential elections and they have their delegate, we are bigger than 11 of those states. And of that, 1 in 5 of those people was born somewhere outside of the United States. And 1 in 4 speak a language other than English at home. So we have for years been incredibly diverse. It's one of the things I always say that makes us able to do such good work, because we're almost like a social laboratory. We reflect everything in this county. Whenever somebody wants to do a project or wants to try something, we have a community in that demographic that they're looking for. And that is a rich part of our work. And my job is to protect everybody who's living and working and going to school in Middlesex County. I really am not concerned with how you came to be here. I'm concerned about you being safe when you're here. And we know that many times, long before this latest crisis, people who come to this country from other countries often come with a very different experience of government, of police departments. They face a lot of challenges when the idea is the police are here to help you. They are not used to that happening. So we have over the years developed lots of programs, including our rights program, which is reaching immigrants and gaining trust. A program that in what seems like a very long time ago, we used to do in conjunction with I.C.E, going out into immigrant and refugee communities and telling them about what their rights were and what would and would not cause them to get on the radar of I.C.E. Needless to say, they don't come to do that program with us anymore. But, so that's sort of the background that we brought to this, because we want people to be safe. We want people who happen to see something happen where somebody else is the victim to feel free to go to the police to talk about that. And if someone is charged with an offense, we believe, no matter where you came from, the process should come to its end. And that had gone on for a very long time. We really had good partnerships that allowed us to do that. And beginning in 2017, that started to change in a number of ways. The first was we started seeing I.C.E. agents appearing in the courthouse. And they might have been there with a civil detainer for somebody, but if you've ever been, especially in the district court, there's a list that hangs out in the front with all the cases that are on for that day, so you can find where you need to go. Well, we discovered that the I.C.E. agents would be out there looking through, making assessments about people's names, putting them into their phones, putting them into their database, and seeing if they might also be subject to being taken. So people were often coming to court, sometimes for a criminal matter, sometimes, people go to court for all kinds of other things. They need guardianship for a relative, they're adopting a child, they have a suit against their landlord or something. So people could be coming into court and leave in the custody of I.C.E. Lots of times, they didn't even have to do anything. For instance, in our Malden courthouse, one of our communities that is most diverse, they would stand across the street from the courthouse in their parking lot with the jacket on that said I.C.E. Well, you don't have to take anybody. People get the message. They're just not coming. That continued to happen, and in fact, it got more aggressive. They also then started taking people that were charged with crimes, literally sometimes in the middle of trial. We started having lots of episodes where a trial would be going on, there'd be a break for lunch or the morning break or something, and when we came back, the defendant wouldn't be there anymore. They were just gone. We can't continue the trial that way. So as that increasingly developed, we did what we had done before in trying to build a partnership. We reached out to I.C.E. We tried to negotiate with I.C.E. about how can we get people here. This person is a critical witness in a murder case. We need them to be able to testify. Somebody's been victimized. The threat has been that his or her family back in their country is going to be killed. You can't take them and send them back there. We had endless discussions. They were not fruitful. And to give you an example of how unfruitful they became, at one point, ICE told us that they would only communicate with us through fax. Now, it's been a long time since I've been sending a lot of faxes, but that was the only way they were gonna communicate with us. Well, that worked for a couple of days until they literally unplugged the fax machine. When we actually asked a police officer to go over to the Burlington office, because our faxes weren't going through, they had unplugged the fax machine. So it was pretty clear that we weren't going to be communicating with them on any real basis to try to resolve this. But the decision to do what we do when something goes wrong, I'm a lawyer. The way you fix those problems is you go to court and you try to figure out how to make this right. The decision to do that when you are law enforcement and the people that you would be going against are also law enforcement is not the usual kind of position we're in. And making it more complicated was, the more we spoke out about it, the more we saw ICE agents in Middlesex County. It was clear that that was not a coincidence. If we complained to ICE, they would appear in 3 of our courthouses the next day. So the risk in thinking about going to court or joining a lawsuit was that they would try to teach us a lesson, step up enforcement, and it's fine for me to make that decision, but I wasn't the person they were going to be coming looking for. And at the same time, and all of the credit for the success we had in this federal lawsuit belongs to David Zimmer, who's here with us tonight from the firm of Goodwin, and his team. Because in the meantime, a number of other people, the Committee of Public Counsel, who often represented the people who were leaving, being taken from the courthouse, the Chelsea Collaborative, which is a group that runs a lot of social services that really had, to give you an example of how this was affecting people, they had developed a potentially very viable, likely to be successful, big lawsuit against landlords who were not following the law, essentially slumlords that were operating in Chelsea. Lots of people were paying money and living in really deplorable conditions. They had a very viable, likely to be successful lawsuit. Well, guess what? The people that were those tenants heard that ICE might be there. They might not want to come to court to pursue that lawsuit. So they had all together been joining in filing a lawsuit. Ultimately, that lawsuit got filed in the Supreme Judicial Court here in Massachusetts. And the judge, in ruling on that lawsuit, said the right place for you to go is the federal court. So then the question was, would we file a case in the federal court? And there are the bigger issues I talked about. Are we suing another law enforcement agency? What's going to happen to the people that get taken while this lawsuit is pending? Then there's also practical issues. Lawsuits cost a lot of money. We don't do practice in the federal court. We could not have taken on this lawsuit. And Goodwin, to their great credit, took this lawsuit on as a pro bono project, devoted hundreds and hundreds of hours on the part of their lawyers to work on this case. And we joined in that case. The case ultimately was filed in the federal court. And one of the things that you can do, and David will talk a little bit more about this, but you can, when you file a lawsuit, sometimes say, I'm likely to win here. This suit is going to take a long time. And if you don't give me some relief right now, 2.5 years from now, 3 years from now, when the case gets heard, much harm will have already been done. And that was the argument. We are likely to win, but in the meantime, lots of people will be gone. It's hard for a judge to do that. The bar is very high because he or she has to believe it's likely you're going to win, because they're kind of prejudging it when they give it to you. The other thing is, if you don't give that kind of an injunction, the other side has every interest in keeping that lawsuit going for a long time. So we asked the court for that preliminary injunction to say that in Massachusetts, and this was unique in the country, courthouses are a place that we expect people to be able to go to get protection. So that when people are either en route home or en route to the courthouse, and while they are in the courthouse, they are not subject to being taken by ICE. shockingly, in the time between when we filed that lawsuit and when the judge ruled on the injunction, exactly what we had feared happened. Enforcement in Middlesex County was stepped up dramatically. If we had been seeing them in 3 courts, they were in 5 courts. If we'd been seeing them 4 days, they were there 5 days. You know, there are people who paid a price for us being able to get this injunction. And ultimately, the court did give us this injunction, making people here the first in the country to be protected, to have that right to be able to go into court and pursue whatever they needed, adoption, guardianship, divorce, whatever it was, a criminal matter. And what's been important to us is that was a great victory, but it only works if people know about that. So we've been spending, you know, we are very invested in it, so we talk about it and think about it all the time, and it got media coverage, so we think everybody knows about it. As we've been going around, and Representative Hecht was really important on this, he and I had a meeting early on, and he invited us to come up to the State House and talk, first of all, to other legislators about it, so they really understood it. And then we've really kind of taken the show on the road, going from community to community with police chiefs and with legislators, to say, here's what the police department's doing. You need help, you should be calling your police department. We don't care how you got here. And here's your protection if you want to go to court. You need a restraining order, you want to do something else. If we call you to testify in a case, and I'll take 1 second to tell you, anybody, no matter what your politics are, if you don't think the right to be able to call the police and go to court is important. We had a case a few years ago in one of our communities. It was a very large fire, enormous fire. It was in one of those big apartment buildings with lots of units. It was a balloon construction building, so the place burnt to the ground in almost no time. Tragically, there was a child who lost their life in that fire. The fire happened about 4 o'clock in the morning. There were lots and lots of people living in that fire. There is not a scintilla of doubt that many, many more people would have died in that building, except for the fact that there was a woman across the street who was going out to her job at 4 o'clock, 4:30, and happened to see the smoke. She went over to the building. She did what most of us wouldn't do. She ran into that building. She banged on doors. She woke people up. She called 911. That woman was a hero in every sense of the word. She was literally shaking when she gave her statement about what she had seen, because she was undocumented, and she feared that somehow ICE would be able to trace that phone call back to her, and that she, as well as the family members that were in that house, her own house asleep, would be taken from this country. There is not one person, regardless of where you were born, that is safer if that's what people think. You know, that fire turned out to be accidental, so we didn't prosecute anybody. But there's also no doubt in my mind that if we had had to go forward and prosecute someone, we would probably never have been able to find her or get her into court. Because she made a decision to risk her own life to go in that building. It's very, very hard for us to say to people, come and testify in court, and oh, by the way, you might end up separated from your children. That's the price you should pay. People tell us it's too inconvenient to come because they have to work, they have to do this, they have to go somewhere. Those are all the reasons. People find it difficult to be a witness for those reasons. Think about if the choice was your own family. And none of us is safer if that's the law in this country. So this is a great victory. People should see what happened as a story where we use the courts for the reason they should be used. And thanks to David's brilliance and the work of his team, we prevailed. But it is a success story. So we all owe an enormous debt to David, to the firm for taking this on. It was a risky proposition. I'm sure we were probably not good clients, and they have devoted an endless amount of time to this. So I am incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah. So I won't repeat, Marian sort of given a lot of the background for this, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we really came in, were asked to sort of get involved in this, to try to put together some sort of theory for stopping this practice that really had happened every now and then before 2016, but as Marian was saying, both here and in a lot of places in the country, it's become a huge problem over the last several years, where ICE has basically used people's appearance in court as a trap, effectively saying, if you show up in state court, we know you're coming and we'll arrest you. And this has sort of had both a direct problem of people, criminal defendants, and other people basically being arrested when they show up in court. But equally problematically, as I think Marian really captured well, it has had this really dramatic effect on people's willingness to go to court at all, and just a real fear, a real belief that going to court basically means risking being deported. And if you think about the types of people who need to go to court for certain things, I mean, you're talking about family law issues, but domestic violence victims, there are a lot of people who really genuinely just wouldn't go to exercise very basic rights. Tenants, there were a lot of stories about tenants who were suffering, who were being subjected to clearly legal conditions under state law, who just tolerated it because the alternative was effectively risking, or at least in their minds, was effectively risking being removed from the country. And I think another example from the Chelsea Collaborative is that they actually had, in Chelsea, they put together a mediation program that never existed before to mediate disputes in the community between people who wouldn't go to court because of the fear of being removed. So they basically had to develop an entire alternative court system in Chelsea to resolve disputes that otherwise would have been handled in court. So this was a huge problem, and it sort of led to what was largely, actually, Marian took a lot of credit for this, a really unique coalition of groups coming together, both Marian as well as Rachel Rollins, but together with the Committee for Public Counsel Services, which is the Public Defender's Office in Massachusetts, joining together to bring